It's time to take your business to the next level, the boss level. These are the premier business owner strategies and successes being utilized by the industry's top talent today. Rock your business like a boss, a VO boss. Now let's welcome your host, Ann Ganguza.
Hey everyone, welcome to the VO Boss Podcast. I'm your host, Ann Ganguza, and I am so excited to bring back once again very special guest, audio engineer, musician, and all-around amazing tech person, Gillian Pelkonen. Hey, Gillian.
Hi, so good to be back talking to you and the bosses.
Yes, I love talking to you because, wait, hang on 1 second here. I know it's corny, but here. Is this thing on?
Oh, it's on. Let me tell you, it is on.
How do I sound?
Honestly, I'm not even saying this because we're on. I think that you sound great and this podcast sounds so great. And your audio editor who is listening to this now, you don't need me to tell you, but you're doing a good job. I really like how it sounds because I listen to a lot of stuff and I'm very critical. I'm always like, oh, I don't really like that. But I really like the way VO Boss sounds.
Well, I would imagine an audio engineer listening to a podcast. I mean, that's what you do. So, I think there's so many contributing factors to what really produces great sound. And I know that we've talked about studios in the past and things that we can do to create great sound, but we haven't really concentrated on this guy right here because first of all, we were always maintaining that you didn't have to have a great mic to sound great. However, I think that it would be a good time to talk about microphones.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I always say that great mics come at many different price points and people think, oh, a great mic is the $1,000 mic, is the $1,500 mic, even like the $800 mic. And that's not always true. And there is a lot that goes into microphones. And I am learning more and more all the time. Realistically, the price point has a lot to do with like how it's made, where it's made. But if you break down what's inside the mic, which I don't even know if audio engineers care about this, but like there's the capsules and the transformers and all of those things that are in the mic that are what produce the sound quality that either makes it more expensive or less expensive, or sometimes a less expensive mic has the same inside design as a more expensive one, but it's just like a brand thing, or that might not be 100% correct. But it is true that people will take the shell of one type of mic and they can make the insides and kind of scope it out to be similar electronics to a more expensive mic. So I don't know. It's not all about the price point. It's all about what you think.
Do I dare ask, like, have you gone inside the capsule? I mean, is that what you do? Do you go into microphones sometimes to check them out, repair them? Just be geekily interested?
I haven't opened up microphones. I mean, a lot of the times, like if you're looking, you have like a pop filter windscreen on yours, because I know you use a 416. And I use a KMS 105, which is just my talking mic. I like to use it for vocals. It's one of the only mics I own because I work at so many studios. I can just basically use whatever mics are there. But this one I love for singing, for talking. It's a really good live mic, but it has like I wish I could like take it off without disrupting the audio, but I can't. It has like an outer windscreen, like a metal windscreen that a lot of mics have. And if you look, you can actually see the capsule in there. And something that we do a lot looking at amplifiers or looking at capsules is if you shine a flashlight in, you can like really see it. But no, to answer your question in a long-winded way, I haven't taken apart a mic yet. I have been doing a lot of looking at the inside of like outboard gear, like preamplifiers and stuff like that. But microphones are on the list for me to look at.
Well, because you use so many different types of microphones, I think in your everyday job, being an audio engineer, you're not just working with voiceover artists, you're working with musicians. Can you break it down for the bosses? Like, let's make it easy. Like, what are the different types of microphones? Like, would a voiceover artist, from what I understand, we're not going to be using the same mics as a musician necessarily. So let's talk about differences in microphones, like from a very base level.
Yes, they're basically 3 different types of microphones, and the types are determined a lot by how they work, but a lot of what is going on inside of them. So there's dynamic microphones, which are never really used for voice. They're used for other things. And then there's condenser mics, which are used by voice actors and used a lot for voice and for detailed things. And then there are ribbon mics, which are not usually used for speaking voice. So basically, as a voice actor, all you need to worry about are condenser microphones. But there are other types of microphones that work for other things that you want to be recording. I could go into more detail about them, but I don't know how necessary it is for voice actors. They always say like dynamic mics are durable. I mean, you use certain ones for voice, like SM57 or SM58, which is like you go to a house party or you go to like a live event, someone's going to be using one of those microphones. The joke is like they're $99 and you can throw them off a building and they'll still work. Like they are so durable. I don't know how to break one without like submerging it in water. And condenser mics are known for being sensitive, which is why we want to use them with our voice, because there's so many intricacies in your voice and in your performance that need to be picked up. And ribbon mics, they're ribbons because they have a little metal ribbon on the inside and it's part of how it works. And those are more sensitive mics, and you use those a lot for like guitar amps or like horn instruments, because you can be really loud and it like smooths out the signal, from my understanding of how I use them and what I know about them.
And so a voice artist wants to use
condenser microphone.
Condenser mic, right?
Yeah, TLDR, condenser mic.
Okay. So I will say in my studio here, I've got a couple of different mics. Now, before I purchased my 416, I had a TLM 103, which I also have here in the studio, which I like. But even before that, I had a Rode NT1 mic. And of course, I went through, I think, the gamut of price ranges. And I think when I started, I mean, goodness, I just admitted the other day on a podcast that when I was streaming live from my living room, my first VO Peeps meetups, I used a USB mic that was the Blue Snowball. And from there, I went to a Rode NT. And then I went to an AT2020 too, which I think was, you know, in terms of expensiveness, was not that expensive, but I thought it was a decent mic. And I think at that point, what would you say in terms of the different types of mics? Because like my TLM 103 was over $1,000 compared to my AT2020, which is like right now, I think you can buy one for $99. What would you say is the biggest difference between those two mics?
I mean, without knowing a ton about what goes into either of them, kind of like I said before, I think the price difference does come from parts. And so I would assume the capsule inside of a TLM 103 is more expensive than the other one, the electronics. When we talk about upgrading mics, it does come with a price. But if you think about what the mic is, it's the capsule, everything inside, the electronics working together, higher quality materials will produce a higher quality signal that's recorded into your computer. So can you get a lower priced mic that sounds good? Yes, because there's also all of the weirdness of we're degrading the audio quality and listening to it through a phone speaker or out of computer speakers. So having really good signal to start with is great. But sometimes basically you can get a signal that sounds good enough to sound professional at those lower price points. But I do think it all comes down to price of materials and sometimes like prestige of brand, at least a little bit, because there are a lot of brands that I know, like Warm Audio, Flea Audio. They make remakes of vintage mics, but also they make like remakes of like a U87, which U87s are still sold, which basically all of the remakes is kind of what I was talking about earlier, similar parts to get a similar sound without the brand price point.
So it's not necessarily, and I know we've talked about this before, so it's not necessary for a voice artist to get good sound by paying more for a microphone.
Yeah, it's like anything. When you're starting out in a business, like I keep talking about my tech work because it's on my mind. I've been doing it all week. I just bought a soldering iron and I bought a $40 soldering iron and the guy I'm working with has a $200 one. But I don't know how much I'm going to be doing it. I'm just dipping my toes in. I don't have a big budget for something that's not paying me back yet. And so it's kind of like, this is my intro thing and it works. We're doing the same work. It works. One day, would I want the more expensive one? Maybe, just to have a higher quality item. But especially for people who are starting, you got to have something to work up to and something to get started with. Because who is starting in voiceover and has a couple $1,000s to drop on microphones? I don't know anybody.
Yeah, that's rare. That's rare. It took me, at least 10 years to get my TLM 103 because my Rode NT1, which was a few $100s, did a great job for me for many years, at least 6 years in the voiceover industry. And I finally decided, well, you know what? I mean, people talk about the TLM 103 and I actually went for that one before I bought my 416. And then I decided that after I got my TLM 103 and I moved to a new studio, I would entertain the 416 because I was also thinking about my 416 for a travel mic. And so I think in terms of like microphones, and you were talking about sensitivity before, sitting outside of the studio, I have a Shure SM7B, which I use because I'm not in my studio, but it's a lot of podcasts use that mic, podcast hosts use that mic because it doesn't pick up a lot of external noise and it sounds good kind of no matter what environment you're in. However, the higher the mic price, the higher the sensitivity, it seems. My TLM 103 picks up a fly or a breath like super easily. And my 416 does as well, but I have to be in a particular location, right? It picks up more in the front of the mic versus the TLM 103, which picks up all the way around. So I guess maybe it has to do with, it's called the cardioid pattern. Is that correct?
Yes, we're talking about polar patterns. It's so interesting. I hear you talking and I'm like, I know exactly why you think these things. Because it is interesting. The SM7B is a dynamic microphone, actually, but it has a cardioid polar pattern. And we use those all the time. I personally don't like the way my voice sounds on it for singing purposes, but a ton of people love it. It's a great studio microphone just in the music recording environment. If you want to be in the control room singing with stuff playing back on the speakers, it's a great mic because it's dynamic and because of the pickup pattern, because it doesn't feed back the way if you use the TLM 103 with speakers, just the pickup pattern, it would feed back. Anyway, am I losing everybody? I'm sorry. I'm just nerding out. Basically, what we're talking about is TLM 103. It's actually pretty sure it's a medium or large diaphragm condenser mic. And so the polar pattern is more wide and the capsule is bigger, so it's more precise and it picks up more sound. The issue that I personally have with the 416 that we can talk about is not everyone has good mic technique with it. And because the pickup pattern of that mic is so precise, I don't know exactly what the pickup pattern is of it, but it's definitely cardioid, if not like super cardioid, which means the pickup pattern area is even smaller. I find people love that mic because they say, oh, I hear a lot of things that like, once I have this mic, then I'll sound great. And people get a 416, they spend a lot of money on it, and then they're outside the range of where the mic picks up. And then it's like, I can't hear you. So I don't know, technique is a big part of sounding good on a mic too. It's not just about the gear. It's knowing where the mic's picking up and just positioning yourself in that area so that it gets you the best sound.
That makes so much sense. And I know that, one of the reasons why I love the 416 for travel is because you end up in environments where it's less than ideal. Like in my studio here, I've got all my acoustic panels, it's built, it's double walled. And so I have a really good environment in which I'm recording. But when I go travel and I'm in a hotel, I don't have this studio. And so I need something that is not going to pick up the hum of the air conditioner or the fan that's in the room. And the 416 I found to make a huge difference. And yeah, you're so right about understanding like your mic and how to use it and mic technique, because I have to be in a particular place in order to make my voice sound good with the 416 close to the proximity versus my TLM 103 where it's not as critical, but yet I couldn't take my TLM 103 to a hotel easily and make it sound as good as I do here in this studio.
Yeah, and something interesting about polar patterns when I first learned about them, and you can look it up, there's diagrams that show you basically the shape of what they look like. I was always thinking, oh, like the pickup pattern, I need to be thinking about what it's picking up. But another big thing about it is thinking about the rejection. Like if it's picking up in a certain way, it's actually rejecting audio from other spaces, which makes everything you're talking about completely true. It's going to reject a lot of the stuff that you don't want in your recordings, which could be a really helpful choice when picking a mic. Like what's your environment like? If you have a noisy studio, or if you have a less than ideal situation, then maybe a large diaphragm condenser or TLM 103 is going to pick up too much unwanted noise. So there's a lot of things that go into making the decision and just things to think about to help you find the best mic for your voice and your situation.
What would be your recommendations for people starting out? I mean, is there a particular mic that you think would be great, or is there a particular, I guess, methodology in terms of picking out a good mic for your voice? Like, what would you recommend? I mean, there's so many people that post on the forums and they're like, what should I buy? How do you attack that in terms of selecting a mic for your voice?
Well, I think my situation is different than most, because I work at a bunch of recording studios. when I was picking like my favorite mics for my voice, I did what is called a shootout, where you just line up a whole bunch of mics and you record yourself on all of them, and then you see which one sounds the best to you. I know you have a bunch of recommendations on your site, and on my site, I do as well. But I guess without getting into specific, like you should get this mic, you should get that mic, there are a few places. I actually, this past weekend, I went into New York City. If anyone lives in New York City area, B&H, photo, video, whatever, technology store has a room, and you can go in and there's a technician that sits with you and you can try out all of the microphones. So really, like, wonderful. My advice would be to have a chance. I know at music stores too, you also have that. If you go to like Sam Asher Guitar Center, you can totally go and try a few microphones before you buy them. And all the ones that we're talking about, the 416, the TLM 103, the SM7B, those are all there because those are very popular microphones. So if you have a chance to try them, great. If you have a friend that has one, that you could try it. But also, if you can't do a shootout in person, there's a lot of resources on YouTube of people testing out different microphones. Sweetwater is one of my favorite resources. They give you so much information, and they do recorded mic shootouts, so you can hear what they sound like on a voice or on the same voice, and maybe just determine what you think sounds good for yourself. And then also be aware of your price range. Sorry, I'm just giving like a bullet point list of advice, and maybe look into a company like Warm Audio that has a remake of the U87 that works for most people's voices, but is cheaper than a real U87 to get a similar sound without paying the full price. That'd be my advice, to do a combo of all those things.
And also, I know that certain companies like Sweetwater, you can buy and they have a great return policy. So it's kind of like try before you buy, and I think it's just wise for anyone who's trying out a mic. I mean, I wouldn't go on blanket advice from anyone, really. I think you have to get that mic and it has to be in your environment. I remember, gosh, a long time ago, I went into a studio and I loved the way I sounded on this particular mic. And I went and I bought it immediately. And when I put it in my studio, it did not sound the same. And of course, that makes a lot of sense because the studio I was in versus the studio that I had at home were completely different. I mean, number one, the studio I was in was a huge studio, had different acoustics than what I had in my room. And I just didn't like it as much. And I ended up returning it. And so I feel like, yes, I have lots of recommendations of like, here, I think this would sound good. But I think you should always like try first and put it in your environment and see if you like it. And then always have that option to return it.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And Sweetwater too, they have representatives that you can talk to and get on with them and be like, this is my situation. This is my preamp that I have. This is what I'm using my mic for. This is what and they can give you recommendations as well. And I've never returned with them, but I do know they have a good return policy. And also, I mean, we've said this in previous episodes, like people glamorize the microphone, but really, first off, no one ever asks you what microphone you're using. And as an audio engineer, I don't care what microphone you're using, as long as you sound good. If you sound good, I don't care. I'm happy. And there's so many other things within the chain that we've talked about, the computer, the preamp, all of those things that contribute to how high or low quality your final sound is.
I do know that there are some clients that do request a particular mic, but I have a feeling it's if you're trying, I think what they're trying to do is they're either matching or trying to match like a sound from the mic from before, but it's very rare. I don't think it's typical. As a matter of fact, in most of the work that I do, nobody ever said to me, you need to have this type of microphone. It's in very rare instances where they say, and maybe in promo or something like that, you need to have a 416 but I also feel like I could be just saying that. I know I've read that it's very infrequent, but it does happen. But for the most part, I've never been requested to have a particular type of mic. As a matter of fact, nobody's ever asked. And so I've just only heard if I didn't sound good. And that had a lot of different factors to it. It wasn't just the microphone that was at play there.
I agree. Facts.
So any other good tips that you have in terms of, I guess, purchasing a mic for a person just starting out? I mean, in terms of price point, do you think if a microphone costs $79, is that something that you think is a good price point to start with? Or what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I guess that's a good question. I never think about it like that, but I think obviously if you can avoid a USB microphone, I would. Just because I think we might have talked about this previously, or I just talk about it all the time. Basically, with a USB microphone, you're paying the price, which is usually lower than most, for all of the, A to D conversion, your microphone, your preamp, all of that in one. And then the power source is coming fully just from like that USB-A. So everything within that mic is usually lower quality. If you can afford to have a preamp and mic, even if they're not very expensive. And in my head, not very expensive is like $200. I would say like $200 microphone, $150 microphone, even some are that are like $100 and then preamps same sit at like $100, $115, $200. That's what I consider inexpensive. And then anything in like the $250 range is like mid. And then like when you start getting like $300, $400, $500, I would say that's like higher. And then all of the like super expensive stuff is usually closer to $1,000. So that's what in my brain, what the range is.
When I'm recommending to a student, I have a studio gear page, and I know you do too. And it really depends on their budget, number one. I think if they aren't sure that this is a career for them, or they may not get into it more than a few hours a week, or they're just not sure about it, I say don't invest a ton of money right away. I mean, you can get some really reasonable equipment. And I'm not talking USB. I would never recommend a USB as a mic for you to use for creating audio for your client. It's good for webinars. It's good for maybe some quick auditions. Even then I say, try not to, because you want to put your best foot forward. So, I mean, but there's some really inexpensive mics that I think sound great as long as you've got a good environment. And audio interfaces, like I would recommend, the AT2020 mic, I think is a great mic. The Rode NT1 mic is great. It's not more than a few $100s. And audio interface, we've talked about this before. I love the Steinberg. And I think the Steinberg is a great interface, and it's $169. So you're not talking about a large investment, and it's something that you can probably resell easily if you decide you don't want to get into the voiceover.
And reuse. I mean, everybody is online now, Zoom meetings. It's just so much better to have some sort of microphone. And there's one USB mic that I've heard that is actually, like, I've been like, oh, what mic is that? Thinking it was, an interface, and it was just like a gaming mic, but that was like a $200 USB microphone. Yeah. So when I was talking about USB microphones, I'm talking about like the $50 ones, the $20 ones that you see on Amazon that it's like, oh, just get this and you'll have a microphone. That's not really a high enough quality for professional voiceover, I don't think.
Agreed. And I think going along with, if somebody doesn't have a huge budget, and they're just getting into the voiceover industry, I think you have to pay equal attention to your microphone as well as the space that you are recording in, because you want that sound, right? That potential audition or that sound to be decent. First impressions are everything. And so I think it's a combination of a decent mic with a place that's not going to be having a ton of echo, that's probably the first thing that we do as casting directors is when we get an audition is throw away somebody that has poor quality audio.
I agree.
The mic is 100%. A part of it. The mic is a part of it. So absolutely. Well, we could probably talk all day about microphones, but I think this is a great primer on microphones for those bosses that are just starting out. I mean, absolutely. Gillian, I'm sure if you had any other recommendations, can people go to your studio gear page? I know Via Boss has studio gear as well.
Yeah, it's gear recommendations, so you can check it out. And I will say, outside of gear issues and mic issues, my next biggest gripe, which we can do an episode on with voiceover audio that I am like, I wish this was different, is over or incorrect processing. So that's that starts to be almost worse.
Agreed.
So we'll leave it there, but just so you know what's in the near future for you guys, I know we're going to have much, much more to talk about.
Well, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Gillian, for those words of wisdom. Absolutely. Bosses, take a moment and imagine a world full of passionate, empowered, diverse individuals giving collectively and intentionally to create the world they want to see. You can make a difference. Visit 100voiceswhocare.org to learn more. And I'm going to give a great big shout out to our sponsor, IPDTL. You too can network and connect like bosses. Find out more at ipdtl.com. You guys have an amazing week, and we will see you next week. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Join us next week for another edition of VO Boss with your host, Ann Ganguza. And take your business to the next level. Sign up for our mailing list at voboss.com and receive exclusive content, industry revolutionizing tips and strategies, and new ways to rock your business like a boss. Redistribution with permission, coast-to-coast connectivity via IPDTL.